Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, it's kind of a special show for me because I weirdly don't think I've ever podcasted with this guy before, despite the fact that I've known him for, I think, 5 years, something like that. It's Matt Moore from over at CBS Sports. We used to be colleagues. We still talk regularly. He's just been locked in on his podcast. He doesn't have that anymore, so he's allowed to go on other podcasts. So I wanted to get him on as soon as I could, just because he is one of the smartest people in the NBA, in my opinion. So, Matt, how's it going, buddy?
I'm one of the smartest people in the NBA. The NBA's got a real problem. Like, the NBA's in seriously bad shape and is going to need an intervention.
Well, it was funny. I was talking to someone in the NBA world, we'll call, yesterday, and one of the things we talked about was the fact that, yeah, like NBA front offices, people would be surprised how much dysfunction there is. Like, yes. People would be pretty shocked by how much it flies by the seat of the pants.
That's very accurate. Yeah. That's
So, Matt, we're going to do 3 different topics today, basically. We're going to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies, who, I don't know, would you call yourself a Grizzlies fan? Like, I feel like once you've been doing this as long as you have, you kind of get jaded, right?
Zach Lowe kind of wrote about, like, he talked about how he used to be a Celtics fan and it kind of died out of him the more you do it. And, like, I've had the same experience. I chose Memphis in 2007 as, like, hey, I'll be a fan of this team because I always loved the league, but I never attached to a team. I was attached to, like, Alonzo Mourning and followed him from spot to spot. And I love those, like, 94 Rockets. With the Grizzlies, it was like, oh, it was 2007. I was like, oh, I could choose the Grizzlies because they'll never be good. So they'll never be, like, a conflict of interest in a meaningful game because they'll never be good. And immediately, like 3 years later, they become a power in the West. I would say that I still have a soft spot in my heart for Memphis, but I try and, especially with everything that I do with analysis, I try and cover them as objectively as I can.
So we're going to go from the Grizzlies to the Clippers, who are kind of in a similar spot, but a little bit different because the Clippers are beset by a ton of injuries. The Grizzlies are beset some by injuries, but more by roster kind of fluctuation and just entering a different era of their being. And then from there, we're actually just going to move into a general discussion of team building and when the right time to pull the plug is. Because Matt, Kevin O'Connor, I've jumped into this conversation a little bit, been kind of talking a little bit about like when that right time is and what the appeal is of being in the middle. Sometimes it's okay to be in the middle. You don't always have to be going for a title. So before we get to there, though, I do want to say this episode is sponsored by DraftKings and by MyBookie. We'll get to those reads later. But first, let's talk about the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies fired David Fizdale on, I believe it was Monday, correct?
Yes.
So they fired David Fizdale on Monday. David Fizdale has been there for about 1.25 years at this stage. They go to the playoffs last year. He has the Take That for Data rant. He is generally known around the NBA as one of the smartest, up-and-coming coaches in the entire league. I believe he's like 45, 46 years old. Has a very, very strong reputation. And I think that over the course of his time with the Grizzlies, had kind of proven that reputation as an assistant with the Miami Heat correct. And the Grizzlies end up firing him in large part due to, I would say, discontent between him and Marc Gasol. So you know a little bit more about this than I do. Like, I've heard grumblings and stuff like that. But what is your overall sense? Whenever you heard David Fizdale was fired, what was your overall reaction upon seeing that news?
You can't cross a superstar the way that he did. So this is always going to be a players' league. It will always be a players' league. Players will always compliment their coach. It is very rare that they will actually credit him with their success because they're the ones that have to go out and actually execute on the floor. I wasn't particularly shocked. It wasn't like, oh, that makes sense. It just wasn't, oh my God. Like, for a lot of people, it was like, what? How could this possibly happen? Oh, I mean, LeBron had that reaction, right? Like, what? Oh, he's the fall guy and all of this stuff. And immediately the conversations start popping up about ownership and leadership and the direction of the team. And what about the roster? The roster's so bad. That's why they're losing. And it's like, look, this does not happen. And I spoke to someone very close with the team. This does not happen if Sunday night's episode with Marc Gasol happens.
Yeah.
And what was important was, it wasn't that he benched him, because that happens pretty typically. It's that he benched Marc Gasol specifically, who's never been benched and is not a player that you've ever had to bench. Like, Gasol's effort has waned. That is not a shocker. In recent years, his effort has waned as he's gotten older, and that's been an issue. His motivation has struggled more than it did when he was 26, 27 years old. However, he has never been a point where it's like, I'm bench, like not like Andre Drummond, where like, I'm taking you off the floor because we literally cannot win with you. It's never gotten to that level. But not only did he do that, but then after the game, he deflected it and didn't like say like, I really just thought that the lineup was working. I felt like it was a matchup thing and we really needed this opportunity. I thought I could get Marc a little bit more rest, and then it just kind of got away from us. Didn't go that route. He instead was like, I'm just trying to win, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. And this has been Fizdale's entire approach, and I want to, like, I've said this. I think David Fizdale is going to be an excellent coach in this league. I think that first-year head coaches, the first time out, they struggle. I think that we got a lot of history on that. They make mistakes, and he said that when he came in, he was going to make mistakes. The problem was that his pride started interfering with his relationship with Marc Gasol, and Marc wasn't in a position. Marc chose not to be in a position to be okay with that, to remedy that, to make that salvageable. So what wound up happening is, when that divide went down, I was pretty confident. I was like, I don't think Marc Gasol demanded that he be fired. That would go against everything I know about Marc Gasol. Marc's not a total sweetheart. He's not some sort of like saint, and I don't know him personally in any regard. I only know him professionally. I've only talked with him a handful of times, but I've done my research on him. And I did not think that he was the kind of guy that would go and say, it's him or me. That's just not who he is. But I did think, I was pretty clear afterwards that management understood that situation was irreparable. And it was irreparable for a very specific reason, which was a personality conflict. It wasn't about how Fizdale wanted him to play. There was a personality conflict between the two that was not going to be remedied. And all of the other stuff around the team, the slump and how they slumped after All-Star break last year, which they're pushing very hard as a narrative, all of that stuff contributed. But in reality, it just comes down to they chose to build around Marc Gasol. They chose to finish out this contract with him. And they are going to do everything possible to salvage that. And if the first move in that list of things is, let's fire the coach, then that's what happens.
So, yeah, I think that everything you said is not only right, but I think it's a very good analysis of the situation. Where I struggle with it a little bit is that, so Sam Amick today reported in USA Today that they were basically not on like amicable, which is really funny given the fact that the writer's name is Sam Amick, obviously. They were not on amicable speaking terms for the last like 10 months. Right. And for a first-year coach to not be on speaking terms with his best player by the time January of his first season rolls around is pretty crazy to me. Like that seems to be evidence toward what you're saying as far as a personality conflict, that this just was not going to work in terms of a person that will get through to this star player. The decision to pick Marc Gasol over David Fizdale, though, to me is an interesting one. And I do agree with you that it's a star-driven league. I don't know that I agree with it, though. So you have Marc Gasol here. He's 32, about to turn 33 years old in, I believe, January this year. He's still a very, very good player. Let's not kid ourselves here. He's still probably one of the 30 best players in the NBA. Would you say that's right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I would say like probably not top 20, but certainly within the top 40. So let's say top 30. He's one of the top 30 players in the NBA. He's aging, but you have this roster that has a billion different holes on it right now. You don't really have a tried and true four-man that's locked under contract long term. You have two massive holes on the wing. You have this five, though, who could actually help a lot of teams right now. I would probably have been trying to move Marc Gasol at this stage. And I know that that's not going to be a popular decision, but when your team is this bad already, I think that that's where I would have gone. I would have tried to at least make a decision to, I guess, build in a different direction, like build around Mike Conley and someone else. And you do have to deal with the fallout of Mike Conley dealing Marc Gasol, and those two, from what I know, in part from what you've written in the past, Mike Conley would not have taken a Marc Gasol trade well. That's correct, right?
Yeah, that would be bad.
That would be bad. So I understand that there are pratfalls there, but you also have Mike Conley under contract for the next 4 years at $1 bajillion approximately. So I think I would have just dealt with the fallout, kind of. You might have a pissy point guard star, but you will have more pieces to build around long term. I do get it, though.
Let's talk about it. First off, I want to say, I don't. My opinion on the Fizdale situation is it was stupid and such a dumb mistake, and he's an awesome coach, and they're just a trash organization. And then there's no, the team is always right, and like this was, he wasn't winning, and the blah 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 blah. And then there's and my thing is like, look, it's not about whether it's like, if you ask me if I would have fired David Fizdale, I don't know enough about the situation to be able to make that call, because I don't know how he does with the rest of the staff, and how he does with the rest of the players, how he does with there's just too many things I don't know. However, if you ask me like based off of his performance, I would say no, I probably wouldn't have. Like, his coaching was still good enough. I would have been like, we got to fix this. We're going to solve this. We're getting these two in a room and we're going to work this out. But my thing is just, it doesn't really matter about should or would or could. It's like, this is what's happening. Now, to your point, here's the issue is, one, let's look at the star market over the last 4 months. And what have we learned? If you are not a 26-year-old or younger star scorer that the other GM trading for just has the biggest crush in the world on, and has extra picks to spare, and has a point guard with a hip injury, and has a forward that he just acquired a better one in free agency, you can't get almost anything in return. Now, Oladipo and Sabonis are having excellent seasons in Indiana, and it's great to see them performing well. However, are either of those players better than Paul George, even with the seasons that they're having now? No.
No, I definitely wouldn't say that.
Are they going to be better than Paul George? No. This is the biggest problem when we evaluate these trades, and I didn't used to think of it. Like, 5 years ago, I would have agreed with you. What I've really started to think about is this, and this is from following a team closely when being in Denver, that operates in a market and in a situation where their reputation around the league is so poor that they cannot generate the kind of response from free agents for them to be able to make additions. And so they struggle with turning assets into improvements. They struggle with turning assets into superior players and even equal players. And that's really, to me, is the issue. And this is where everyone misses, is like, look, Marc Gasol's 32, and he's on the downslide. Okay, you're absolutely right. But who Marc Gasol is going to be for the next 4 years is still almost definitely, not absolutely, but if you're playing the percentages, somewhere between 60 and 80% probably going to be better than whatever the best asset is that they could turn him into.
I will say it depends a lot on how he ages as a 7'1", 33-year-old. He looks great right now. This is my question, but here's my problem with this is, like, Chris Harrington brought this up today. Look at his brother. Yeah, that's a great point.
His brother, who, by the way, I think is a fundamentally different player than Marc and has a different body than Marc.
Yep.
And has a different injury history than Marc.
Yep.
But his brother is still giving meaningful minutes to the Spurs at age 38. And, like, there's a lot of ways that I look at that and I'm like, oh my God, he's a disaster defensively sometimes. But guess what? His defensive rating's still really good with San Antonio. They cover for it. And it just really hasn't really mattered because he's still so good at everything else.
Well, you know what the issue there is going to be, though? So, Pau Gasol at 32 years old was still really good for the Lakers, right? At 34, he made that, like, kind of bullshit all-star game in Chicago, right, where he was a total mess defensively. I think that version of that, like, drop-off from where Pau Gasol was at 32 with the Lakers to where he was with Chicago, which with Marc Gasol is kind of what we're talking about, I think you probably can get a better trade or get a better player in a trade for Marc Gasol than that version of Pau Gasol. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just think that Marc's better than Pau. Like, not in terms of scoring, but just in terms of passing and the way that he approaches the game, his physicality. Like, when Marc's plugged in, he's still really good defensively. This is the other thing is, you mentioned, like, when you have a team this bad, well, okay. When this team started out and they were one of the hottest teams in the league and they knocked off the Rockets and the Warriors, we weren't saying that. And then what happened? And it's like, well, yeah, but they all stayed straight. Guess what has coincided with that exact occurrence? Mike Conley has been out with his Achilles. For sure. And, like, if Mike Conley doesn't get hurt, David Fizdale is probably still the coach. That's just the reality. Are they still at this great pace? No, they clearly would have hit a slide because they got a lot of problems. And it wouldn't have solved the issue between Fizdale and Gasol. That still would have continued. But Mike Conley, when they had him in the lineup, that team, and this is the thing is, if you say, like, when you have a team this bad, well, this is the issue I have. Marc Gasol was having a really good season to start, and he's gone to hell without Mike in the stretch, and that's on him, and he's played badly and needs to play better. However, Mike wasn't even having that great of a season. His presence added so much to them. Tyreek Evans is having a terrific season for them. He's been incredible. Yeah. Mario Chalmers has been bad individually, but he's made the team a lot better. The numbers are really good. Chandler Parsons is hitting threes. They've gotten good minutes there. JaMychal Green has been terrific since coming back from injury, and he missed a month of time. Wayne Selden hasn't gotten back on the floor, and I understand everyone's going to go, who? But like Wayne Selden seriously showed a lot last year in terms of what he's going to be able to contribute at the two-guard position, and that's pivotal because Andrew Harrison has been so bad. Yeah, he has. So bad.
Like, put it this way, they're starting Jarrell Martin, or at one point, they might not be starting him anymore. I haven't watched, like, their last 3 games, but, like, they were starting Jarrell Martin regularly, like, for the first month of the season. Like, that's terrible. They were starting Andrew Harrison and playing Andrew Harrison legit minutes.
Well, and part of this gets back to Fizdale. Like,
his rotations, I think, were bad.
Were bad. And that's okay. That's the thing, is like he could still be a good coach with bad rotations.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coaches that are kind of in this space where there's some things you can point at that they do really well, especially big picture stuff. And then there's some stuff that's like, if you start looking at the individual, like the little contextual stuff, it's like, ooh, that's a bad look. Ooh, that's not so good. Like, why is he doing this? There's a lot of coaches that are in that space right now. So I wasn't necessarily surprised. I do think that the thing is that a lot of it is, if you want to argue the Memphis Grizzlies, and I know we're gonna get to this later, but if you're gonna argue that the Memphis Grizzlies should blow it up, I would say this: you can't. I don't think what you can do is you can't trade Marc for what you would need to trade him for, and then keep Conley. Because if you're trading Marc, the only possibility for you getting equal return is you literally have to trade him for something like the Pacers pick, and then, or like the Pacers combination of like the Oladipo, what Indy got for Paul George, what I'm saying, is like 2 young prospects, right, and then hopefully you get a pick. Now, the problem is the first round pick has been hard to come by, right? Like
the elite one, really, yeah.
It's really hard for star players to get traded for those. The Kings traded Cousins for one, but it was protected.
Yeah, it was.
It was top 3 protected. Paul George, not traded for a pick. Carmelo Anthony, not traded for a pick.
I will say this with Cousins, too. Like, they essentially got 2, like, top 10 picks because of Buddy Hield. Like, and I get it with Buddy Hield, trust me. But I think that they valued him as a top 10 pick at that stage, right?
Yeah. Sure, that's true.
They misevaluated, but I think that that's what they thought.
Right. And but even then, like, that's a prospect and not a pick. Because, like, but like, you know this, like the pick is always going to have more value than when they turn into actual people with actual limitations and hangers on and girlfriends that are distracting them and everything else.
Yeah, the thing that I think teams don't do a good enough job of is thinking ahead of what drafts are looking stronger versus weaker. Like, I think that it's very important to recognize, hey, the 2017 draft from 2015 onward was always considered more valuable than the 2016 draft or the 2015 draft, you know?
Right. And so, and like this year, you know better than I, but there's certainly a lot of hype around this 2018 class.
Right. Like, top 5 picks this year are going to be exceedingly hard to come by because of that.
Yeah. And so then so what happens then is you get like, well, you could get a pick, and it's like, if I would just be honest, if I was Chris Wallace, who there's some debate about who's in charge of the front office, and I honestly can't tell you. And I cannot tell you who is in charge. But with the history of the Memphis Grizzlies, I am very much in the camp of like, look, they're gonna, if they manage, like, let's say that they trade it for the Brooklyn pick, that Cleveland is just like, that LeBron goes to him and says, hey, I think I want to stay. I just really want to beat Kyrie for the next 5 years. And he goes, but you got to go get one upgrade. I need a big guy down low because Tristan's has lost his mind. And so they deal the Tristan Thompson and the Brooklyn pick.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what I would tell you will happen, is that Brooklyn will finish with a bottom 3 record. They will get jumped by 2 teams. The Grizzlies will land somewhere around 5 or 6 in the lottery. 4, 5, 6 in the lottery. And what will happen is every pick in front of them and 2 picks behind them will be either all-stars or high-level contributor players. And the one guy Memphis picks will be out of the league in 6 years.
And you know who it'll be? It'll be Mohamed Bamba, the guy that looks exactly like Hasheem Thabeet.
Right. Like, it's not just because of the Hasheem Thabeet pick, but they've just been so bad at, like, somebody brought this up to me. They're like, man, look at all these guys. Like, Tony Roten.
It was me. They haven't hit a draft pick in the last 10 years.
It's not just that they haven't hit a draft pick. Look at these guys that they've taken. They're not in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, oh, they took Wes Johnson, and, like, now, like, Wes Johnson's been on 7 teams, but he's, like, he plays defense and he shoots threes, and he's a rotation NBA guy that's been in the league a long-ass time. Like, that's, like, that would have been a win for Memphis. That's how bad their picks have been. You know?
Jordan Adams
Wade
can't
Baldwin,
stay healthy.
Like, Wade Baldwin, who I thought was going to be really good. Not in the league. I think he's with somebody, but he's on injured reserve.
Portland.
He's with, like, that's how bad it's been. You can't tell me, like, they should rebuild with draft picks when they're so bad. And then the answer is, well, if that's so bad, then they need to remove management. Okay, that's fine.
Well, actually, hold on, because that's where I want to go. I think that a lot of the issue with this organization right now is the fact that they're in the midst of this kind of ownership transition, I guess is the way to put it. Like, it's not even really a battle from what I understand, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just like this transition where I think Steve Kaplan is about to make an offer on the organization to Robert Pera, and then Robert Pera has to decide if he wants to take the offer or not. So, like, I don't know who's making the decisions, basically. And then, a level below that, you have the front office, where Chris Wallace was the GM for a long time. There was like a coup, essentially, right? Like some sort of like uprising where he lost power, and then gained power back again. And then there's also been like this kind of, there's always been too many voices with the Grizzlies, basically, in the front office. There's another guy that's in there I know of who I can't think of his name right now. From what I know, Hollinger at least has a voice of some sort. Like, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen here to where I think it was always Wallace, or maybe during the coup stage, maybe not Wallace, but like Wallace has been making the call for a lot of these picks and stuff. I would be, as soon as Steve Kaplan takes over, or if he does, or whoever ends up with this organization, I probably would be seeking new management at this stage. Like, that's just the reality of the situation, right?
It's tough because here's the thing. Okay, they swung out on draft pick after draft pick. Trash organization. Get rid of them.
They've also made the playoffs 7 years in a row.
They made the playoffs 7 years in a row. What gets lost in that, because it's like, all right, look, you can talk about that and say, all right, they hit with Mike Conley. That was a good draft pick.
Yeah.
As somebody who was dubious not only at the time, but a few years later, you could say I was dubious of Mike Conley. That turned out really well for them. Choosing to get Marc Gasol in the Powell trade, even though their hands were tied, that worked out for him. The other thing, though, is that through that time, they had so many guys that contributed to those squads, and they did a really good job of identifying veterans that would help them.
Yep.
To the point where they had so many that they wound up getting rid of them at inopportune times. Like, they got rid of Courtney Lee because they weren't going to re-sign him, and Courtney Lee was friggin' amazing on that team. He was everything that they needed. Like, realistically, I sincerely believe if they had kept Courtney Lee, probably the context of the season where they traded him changes. That's how good Courtney Lee was there. He was such a perfect fit next to Mike Conley, a defensive player that could get hot and hit from three. He was perfect.
Tayshaun Prince was pretty useful for them for a while.
Vince Carter, like, you know, and because part of it is like everyone just wants to point to, well, he got Zach Randolph and Tony Allen. Look, those were desperate, wild gambles that worked out for Chris Wallace.
Right.
Like, I'll just say that. Like, Zach Randolph was toxic. Like, oh my God, you cannot have this guy. And then he turned into the lovable Zebo. And that's awesome and a testament to Zach more than anything. But both, and Tony was always kind of the same dude, which is like rough around the edges, but fucking played his heart out. Mm-hmm. And so, like, those two moves were gambles that worked out well and happened to sync with Mike and Mark. Like, the chemistry those four had was a special combination of personalities that you don't find very often. And that was great. But in there, they also did all these things. And with the current team, you look at it and you say, like, look, JaMychal Green was a cast-off from the San Antonio Spurs who, like, wasn't around at all 2 years ago. And now, like, he plays one of the most pivotal positions in the NBA. He is a stretch four that can hit threes and defend and rebound, and that's hugely valuable. So, like, the front office has had all of these wins. And with the draft picks, if you wanted to build a defense of them, which I personally do not, but if you wanted to build a defense of them, the defense would go something along the lines of, you know what? No, they're not hitting on these gold mines in picks 20 through 30 that the San Antonio Spurs always do. If you want to hold them to the standard of the Spurs, fine, they're awful. But the reality is that they were never drafting in key position. They were never drafting in a position to actually get somebody who could help them. And they did acquire Dillon Brooks this summer, and Dillon Brooks has looked really good. Yep. So, like, the fact that they've missed on so many guys speaks poorly. Here, though, let's, like, circle back around. If you decide to trade Marc Gasol, you're going to trade Mike Conley, which means you're going to get new management. And what's the first thing that new management's going to want?
High draft picks.
Yes. What's the second thing that new management's going to want?
I'm going to let you answer this one.
They want their own guy coaching.
Oh, yeah.
Because every single new management wants their guy coaching.
I would agree with that. But Fizdale's reputation around the league is strong enough to where I do wonder if he would have kept.
But he's not their guy. Like, it's possible. So somebody made the argument to me the other day, like, look, Fizdale's entire thing is developing players. Don't you want him around for a rebuild? And my response on that is, yeah, but I think that if you get to that point, you're looking at a whole revamping. And one, I don't know that Fizdale wants that job. Fizdale came to the Grizzlies in part because he was like, oh, okay, this is a team that needs that needs to adjust the way it's playing, but it's got a veteran core. They're winning now. And then we can develop some young guys behind them. It wasn't like, I'm coming here for a rebuild. That wasn't why he was coming in. Like, and that's the thing. He's like, would Fizdale want to be there? And that's like the murmurs. And Jeff Calkins mentioned this in Memphis. He mentioned this. He was like, Fizdale was daring them to fire him. He was relieved. He wanted out. And to me, honestly, that's a pretty bad look on Fizdale. Like, I'm always of the, like, look, if things are tough, you do your job, you do the best you can. And like that goes back to, like, the conversation about them not talking in 10 months. Like, Marc Gasol should not be so uncoachable that this is the problem that this is the problem exists. Like, Marc Gasol should not be like that. But if you're the head coach and your second best player at this point, because Mike's better than him now, if your second best player is Marc Gasol, like, at some point you sit down, you go to Spain. You go to Spain during the tournament. And you watch him, and then afterwards you go talk to him and, like, I want to sort this out. Like, we got to get on the same page. I believe in you. I want you to be great. I need you in order for our team to win and for me to be great. I need your help. And you try and mend that fence. Whatever happened between the two of them was so bad that it's like one of them had to have bent, and neither of them did. And that's on both of them, but it was a thing.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Before we move on, Matt, let's pay some bills. Holiday cash, you need it, and I know where to get it. MyBookie is the place to score serious cash on your sports predictions. Believe it or not, the holidays are just around the corner, and while that means plenty of parties, gifts, and spending, it also means there's lots of football, basketball, and hockey games you can score big on every single day. Man up and play like the pros on game day. You can play the money line, side, or total. MyBookie is your hookup for all your betting needs and offers super fast payouts when you win. Where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And if you want to make money betting on the games, you go to mybookie.ag. They're the only site I would recommend. I trust them, but you don't have to take my word for it. Check it out yourself. They have odds on every matchup in a mobile site that makes wagering on your smartphone a breeze. Join now, and MyBookie will match your deposit with up to a 50% bonus. Use the promo code GAMETHEORY, that's GAMETHEORY, to activate this offer. Visit mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid at MyBookie. Our second sponsor is DraftKings. Listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season is back, and now that your favorite hardwood heroes have returned to action, it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test to win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of similar skill level. The best part, you get to draft a new team every day, and drafting a team is the best part of fantasy. The only thing better is winning cash doing it. Huge cash prizes await every single night only at DraftKings. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com to play free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total cash prizes tonight. Don't wait. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com now to choose your lineup, and you can seriously cash in tonight. That's code CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Let's move on, though, because we just talked about the Grizzlies for like half an hour. Let's talk about the Clippers.
They're bad.
They're really bad. Four of their starters from opening night are out right now. It does look like Milos Teodosic and Danilo Gallinari are going to be back at some point within the next 5 to 10 games. But Patrick Beverley is out for the year, and he was an incredibly important piece for them. And then their most important piece is now out for probably 2 months, Blake Griffin, with I would say a knee sprain caused by Austin Rivers that Doc Rivers is now calling caused by Lonzo Ball because Doc Rivers is a crazy person. Where do the Clippers even go from here? Like, are we at a full stop tank mode, like with the Clippers, where they should be moving DeAndre Jordan for whatever they can get for him?
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, look. Here is your remaining roster for the remainder of this season. Austin Rivers, DeAndre Jordan, Blake when he gets back, Gallo for whatever stretch that he's going to be around. But look, this guy's injury history is just as bad as Blake's.
Yeah,
just is. Like it was always a thing in Denver. And not only was it a thing in Denver, but it's not like Gallo's like rushing to get back either. That's just not how he goes. Lou Williams, good player. Wesley Johnson, like I said, good player.
They've a lot of good players.
Yeah, Sindarius Thornwell, like what I've seen. Like, there's a lot of stuff there. Teodosic, he was looking really promising and fun, but, like, yeah, Willie Reed, Sam Decker, Montrezl Harrell, I like all those guys, but, like, it's rough without Blake. I think, so, here's the problem I have. You have Blake on a long-term contract, and you have Gallo on a long-term contract. If you go full tank mode and you tank DeAndre, what does your future look like? Like what you're really hoping for if you tank this year is you're actively going for what it's not a bad comparison actually outside of the fact that they don't have a player level of David Robinson. Blake's good, but not David Robinson. But it's like the Spurs thing, right? Is you have a team that's good every year. You have one really rotten season. Everybody gets hurt. You tank your eyes out, and then you try and get like a transformational player. Because like if they were to tank. If they were to trade DeAndre and tank, and then they got Bagley, and then you're like, wow, they went from DeAndre Jordan to Bagley. Okay. But then I don't know how Bagley plays with with Blake. That's complicated. Because that's one of the things, right, is you definitely, I don't think, want Blake taking the beating of playing center.
No. So
you got to have a center next to him. And what center are you going to get that's going to be bigger and badder than DeAndre Jordan?
Well, like the argument would be DeAndre Ayton probably from people. Yeah. But again, like DeAndre Jordan is evolved DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, and like Ayton's a monster. I've like checked out the clips of him, and he's a monster. I know that he's having defensive issues because you wrote about that for The Athletic. But I mean,
he's DeAndre had never been asked to defend before.
Yeah, but like DeAndre had defensive issues at A&M. Like DeAndre was a mess defensively at A&M.
Right.
Like DeAndre was a mess until about 2 years ago, if we're going to be completely honest.
Yeah.
But it's like, as he built out, he became more of a presence, and then he became good.
It takes bigs a long time to learn how to like rotate inside and play with actual verticality and like keep themselves in rebounding position. Like it's hard.
I'm of the part of it's because they play in LA, so I think it's different because they haven't completely shook they're the Clippers thing. But it's a little better. Like it's a little better, right? It's not.
It's better, yeah.
You're not playing for. Thankfully I've forgotten his name. Sterling. You're not playing for Sterling anymore.
Yeah.
You're playing for Steve Ballmer, who's like lovable crazy man. Who like their organization has really kind of improved in terms of its overall image, and they've invested a lot, and they have a strong like organization, and they're trying to move into their own arena and trying to separate themselves from the Lakers. Like there's all these positive things going on. So in that regard, to me, it's like they're not in Memphis' spot where, like, look, if you start going down the hill, it could be forever until you get back. But the Clippers, I would be like, like Blake's going to be back in 2 months, which means that he's going to be back right before the trade deadline. I would look to package everybody. I would clean house and just be like, we are starting over, because you can get a pick for Blake Griffin. Like, he's a level player.
Oh, you're cleaning house. You're like including Blake in this.
I am cleaning house. Like, I am starting over. I am talking about, like, Doc is quietly like, go ahead and head off to the golf course, friend. Go ahead.
Doc should be gone, no doubt.
Get your tee time in while you're checking on what team is going to want somebody with basketball ops experience that you're going to take over, because that was like the whole thing last summer, right? Was he was trying to maneuver. The rumor, was that he was trying to maneuver for the Magic job.
Yeah.
And so like let him go completely off. Trade DeAndre, trade Blake. You got to rehab Gallo's image a little bit, and Gallo's contract is problematic. But like trade Gallo. If you trade those three guys, you don't have anybody left on roster that you're like, oh, we're really stuck with this. Like Lou Will is not on. Well, I think
trade Lou Williams probably for a late first.
Yeah, and like he would have value to like some team that's really struggling to score, that's trying to make the playoffs. Like OKC. But trade everybody. I would just run it. I would just start completely over. That seems weird based off of everything I've said. It's just like, look, if you're LA, the other thing is, look, if you
market size is big here.
If you clean the deck, and honestly, here's an alternative. Everybody's talking about trade DeAndre, keep Blake. What if you trade Blake, get multiple assets back, or I just thought of this. God, this actually makes a lot of sense. You with me? You ready for fantasy crazy world?
I think that I know where you're going, because I was about to say the same thing, but go ahead.
What? No, you go ahead.
You're going to say trade Blake, get like $1 billion assets back, and re-sign DeAndre, give him an extension, and go after LeBron, right? I got
an even better one. Who wants to play in LA?
Paul George.
Who's having a really rough season with OKC?
Paul George. Oh, no.
Who's from Oklahoma that plays for the Clippers?
Yeah, I get it.
Blake for PG. And then you go into your meeting and
what else are you getting with Paul George? Because you're not just getting Paul George in this deal,
right? And then you do that deal with whoever, and then in your meeting with LeBron, you sit down and you say, you can play with a guy with a 20-year-old whose shot looks like some sort of mutant transformation of what a jump shot should look like, Brandon Ingram's and KCP, or you can play with DeAndre Jordan and Paul George. We'll put 3 shooters around you and a rim protector. How about that? And you get to be in LA.
And what you're saying? You'd have to move. Well, let's see. What do they have? They have $59 million guaranteed right now. That doesn't count DeAndre. You would have to move Austin, which would probably mean Doc would have to go. You would have to move Wes Johnson. Patrick Beverley might get in the way here. I'm trying to do it without getting rid of Teodosic, but I guess you get rid of Teodosic too. And yeah, it's actually pretty clear. This is not impossible.
And I got the kicker for you. So LeBron likes Doc a lot, right? Like he's always really respected Doc.
Right.
He's been a close buddy of Doc's. But look, you're going in a different direction. You go ahead and you let Doc go.
You know who you hire?
David Fizdale.
Yep. Knew that one was coming. That's beautiful.
And so you go into that meeting with David Fizdale, DeAndre Jordan, and Paul George.
I'm trying to figure out if it's doable. Like if the math works.
Everything is. I'll tell you this. I've swung. So I used to be like, oh, you just make it work. And I was like, that's not how the CBA works. You have to make sure this math works out. And then I used to be like, well, you got to be reasonable about what you can accomplish. And then Daryl Morey kind of taught me that no, if you have enough will, you can generate whatever cap space you need.
Yeah, and I guess you're saying get rid of, like, what is DeAndre's cap hold? Hold on. DeAndre's cap hold is going to be like $33 million. So 33, you can do this. You can definitely do it. You'd have to trade Gallo, but you can do it. You'd have to trade Gallo, Rivers, and probably Teodosic and Wes Johnson, but you could do it. This is not a bad plan. I'm not going to lie to you. This is not a bad plan.
It's probably, well, I'll tell you what, it's a better plan than just being like, no, we're injured, let's run it back. Or
no, we have Lonzo Ball. We're fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing is, like, I would, if I'm the Clippers, I would be more aggressive. Like, Memphis, I think, needs to be very conservative because of where they're at.
Well, I mean, like, so let's say this. Do you think you could swing it with Blake instead of DeAndre? We have Blake. Would Oklahoma City's not going to be willing to take DeAndre though, so it has to be Blake.
Yeah, I guess like here's the thing: is like if you're LeBron, who actually makes you better, and like who do you play better with? Like LeBron may like Blake a lot, but like is LeBron really going to look at Blake Griffin and be like, "Oh no, this is a perfect compliment to me"? Because we know what LeBron likes, which is LeBron wants 4 shooters on the floor with him at all times, even though he wants rim protection too. It's complicated, and that's why he likes the Channing Frye stuff, right? It's like Channing is a tall person, even though he's not good defensively. Defensive rating is excellent this year, by the way, but like Channing Frye is a tall person who shoots threes. DeAndre Jordan's obviously not that. However, he is more comfortable with 3 shooters and a big than he is with him and then somebody else who's like complicated and like. You have 2, I call them omega forwards, these forwards that can run the floor and do everything. Like, you have 2 omega forwards in that situation, and I don't think you want that. Like, every time Blake would go face up and out of the post and either try a jumper or try a driving hook and miss, like, every single time he would isolate, LeBron would be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, LeBron, he'd be very angry about that.
Yeah.
So I guess, let's say that doesn't work and you don't get LeBron. What do you do then?
If you don't get LeBron, in this certain situation that we've configured, I would.
So you lose DeAndre in this case. You lose Paul George in this case. You're back to just being the Clippers, and you're back to being like a very, very, very bad version of the Clippers, like even by like old Clippers standards.
I guess in that situation,
and to trade Gallinari, you're probably going to have to attach a first-round pick to it.
It's tough. I think, man, that's the problem is with how they configured the team.
The Gallinari signing was one of the worst signings of last offseason, I think.
I won't go that far. I think that because I never want to assume that players' injury histories are going to continue. I just don't.
Well, it just clogs their cap though. Like he's not good enough on that team to make a difference between them being like the 8 seed and the 4 seed.
No, he's not, but I think he can be part of a team that reaches a 4 seed.
Sure. I think he's a $20 million player. Like, I actually like Danilo Gallinari's game. Like, he's excellent at getting to the foul line. He's excellent at shooting threes. I don't want to say better defensively last year, but he at least, like, sometimes tries. A little bit. Occasionally. And I think that you can work with that defensively in a playoff setting, at least. I don't think he makes sense for $20 million on this team.
So yeah, and I liked it because I was like, okay, it gives them a second. If you're not going to have a dynamite point guard, which Teodosic was an unknown, Teodosic was an unknown, and Beverly's Beverly. If you're not going to have like a super dynamic,
you know what you're getting in Beverly,
right? But if you don't have like a super dynamic point guard, what you had then is 2 playmakers. You had Blake and Gallo, who are both basically combo forwards that could play make, and that was like a really interesting combination. Like I got it. It made sense to me for them to do that deal, and I'm somebody that's like soured on Gallo's game the more I watched it in Denver, but it made sense to me from what he was going to be able to bring. It was just like it was just.
See, you know what the problem is with Gallo on this team when he decides to do his goofy shit, like in that area between the elbow and the corner, or like in the mid post, or wherever he does it to get to the foul line. Blake's looking at him the same way LeBron would look at Blake. Just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? They've similar, like they want to be in the same spots on the floor.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think the Clippers are in a really weird spot. To me, your best situation is to start over because part of it's like, I don't think you can get. I think you can get way better assets even with an injured Blake Griffin. I think you can get way better assets for Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan than you can get for Marc Gasol. I think that you're just going to get better assets for him.
That's an interesting question. Who do you think that DeAndre would return more in a trade than Marc Gasol?
Yeah, because he's younger. And it's like
he only has 1 year though.
That's a good point. Probably not because of that. Probably not because of that. Because people have really gotten obsessed with that, which I'm not positively certain about. But that's definitely. I think it's probably true. I think it's about even, honestly, with the contract.
I agree. I think that it's basically that. I think DeAndre's. Which player do you think is better right now? That's another good question.
Marc Gasol.
You think Marc's better?
Yeah, Marc's better.
I think it's situational, but
no, Marc's better. Because here's the deal. DeAndre still has a lot of possessions where he doesn't do anything defensively. Where it's like you can. I guess here's the thing.
I will fight you on that for sure. Okay.
You can neutralize him defensively a lot easier than you can Marc Gasol when Marc Gasol is engaged. Marc's still one of the best in the league at hedging. He's still one of the most active guys in terms of knowing when to get his hands up and intercept passes. There's just all these things that to me Marc does better. And it's also like, look, Marc's one of the best passers.
That's big. I think that's the big differentiator.
Like he is legitimately one of the best passers in the NBA. He is if I was making a list of the top 15 passers in the league, he would be in my top 15. DeAndre is a great rebounder. He's a way better rebounder than Marc. Marc's always been mediocre at rebounding.
DeAndre is probably the best rebounder in the NBA, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. That's why Alonzo Ball, obviously. I think Jordan's presence matters a lot.
Well, here's going to be where I fight you on the defensive side of the ball. So I think with DeAndre, even the possessions where he kind of, I don't even want to say like he doesn't give effort, but he'll kind of get lost sometimes. He's still one of the most communicative like center backs in the entire NBA. Like you see him every single possession. Like you go to Clippers games, he's calling out everything from the back line. You know what I mean?
And I guess here's a big key. Right now, I will take Marc Gasol, but this is important to matter or to consider. DeAndre's only going to get better. When the Nuggets signed JaVale McGee to a huge extension, which was a catastrophic, just one of like Masai Ujiri skipped town because he wanted to help the good people in Africa and has done amazing things with what the Raptors have done for him in that regard.
Oh, yeah.
And went to a better situation and they paid him more and like it was just like a good deal. But like he left, so Masai just like never had that JaVale McGee deal shadow him and follow him around like it would have most executives. Like if he'd stayed, it would have always been like this thing that trailed him, and now it's like the JV thing, which is like a minor league version of that. But when he did it, I asked him about what the reasoning was, and I was like, "Did you do this move because of now, or because of what JaVale's going to be when he's 28?" He's like, "I did it because of what he's going to be in 28." He's like, at 28, I think he can be a top-level defensive player because that's how long it takes for big men to come into his own. Now, that didn't happen because JaVale's JaVale.
Yeah, NBA teams have made much greater investments in learning like the mechanics of the brain and how people operate on a personal and personality basis.
Yeah. But the thing with DeAndre is that the next 4 years of his career are going to be some of the best of his career. Are going to be defensively, they'll be the best of his career, and he will be a better defender over the next 4 years than Marc Gasol will be. So you have to factor that in any decision. But you also have to pay him.
Yeah,
got to pay him the money. So, good luck with that.
So here we've kind of floated around it now. What do you think the best possible deal is that you can get for DeAndre Jordan? I've talked about this in the podcast before. Like, I honestly don't know. Because I don't know where the market is. It has to be the Cavs. It has to be maybe Milwaukee could get involved. But
let's assume the Cavs are rational and don't include the Nets pick.
Right.
I think it's their pick and DeAndre or in Tristan. Tristan can still be really good.
I agree.
For whatever reason, where Tristan's head has been at the last couple of years, he's slipped since the 2016 finals.
Yeah.
He just hasn't been the same dude. And that may just be that the team's evolved or how Lou's coaching or how they've adapted to playing, or maybe he and LeBron had some sort of conflict. Like, there's a million things that could have happened. I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, I think that Tristan can move past that, and Tristan's going to have a long career, and he's going to be good, even with how much the league has evolved towards stretch fives. He's going to be good. He's going to be an effective player.
So my case to you is going to be, I think they can get a better offer somewhere than that, though.
Okay. So the question then is, who needs a shot-blocking, rebounding, pure defense, pure muscle five?
I would say Milwaukee makes sense.
Okay.
I think Milwaukee.
I think it's a little tricky with the spacing, but I get it.
Yeah, I think Milwaukee would value him. They value length. They value they value character, I would say, relatively highly in comparison to the rest of the league. It's a little bit different now because Hammond's gone, but John Horst has been there for a while, and I would think that they probably operate in a very similar manner. Milwaukee, I think, makes sense to me. I mean, like, are the Knicks dumb enough to try and do this?
No, they're not anymore.
I hope not, but I'm not 100% sure on it.
I don't. Okay, the Tim Hardaway Jr. deal was dumb. The Ron Baker deal was dumb. But even then, like, THJ is actually, like...
He's been fine so far.
He's a fine player. Like, it's just too much money, but it's like, THJ is not a guy that you sign and then you're like, oh, God. Well, like...
Here's an offer I'll give you. Would the Clippers do Gortat, Kelly Oubre, and the Wizards first?
That's good. It's real good.
Like, that seems okay. That seems...
I don't know that the Wizards would, because I don't know that the Leonces can fit the luxury bill.
I think that's fair, and to be honest, I don't know if I would want to deal Kelly Oubre for that. But, like, I think it's a risky deal, given that DeAndre has a year left on his contract. I'm trying to think, man. It probably can't be Portland. Like, I don't think that you do Nurkic plus something else for DeAndre. No. But, like, the market is hard to find. The market is really hard to find for him.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's. I totally agree. I think it's really difficult. I think there's probably a possibility that, like, let's say Miami goes down the drain. Like, they dropped to 10 and 11 tonight.
Yeah.
If Miami goes down the drain, they'll entertain Whiteside for Jordan. Like,
okay. I have a funny one next, but that's interesting to me.
They'll listen to that. This might shock you. I wouldn't be wholly surprised if Houston poked around at it.
Houston's tough for me because I know how much they love Clint Capella.
They do, but you got to remember who you're dealing with. And Daryl is always going to look at the objective decision. He does not get caught in emotional traps. It's one of the best things about him as a GM. Yeah. Amongst all of the things that you can say about him, good and bad, right, is like the negative is like he doesn't form enough of an emotional relationship. But like Daryl Morey does not get caught in the we just really like him as a player. Like he doesn't like we like him as a person. He does not get caught in that. His thing is I
think they like him as an asset. Like they really, really like him as an asset.
Yeah. And it would be like they're way a long way with him. That they do love his play and he's great and it's so it's like very unlikely.
My funny one is Dallas.
God.
Like that would be objectively funny, right?
So what is that deal? How do you get the money there?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you're dealing Nerlens. Like, are you going to deal Barnes? I guess like Wes Matthews.
You can get the money with Wes Matthews. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why they would want Wes though.
I mean, Wes has. Last time I checked, Wes literally had the worst raw plus minus in the NBA.
I think he's been fine defensively. The problem is that he's just playing really like absolute shit offensively this year.
Okay, so he's another guy that you could say like he might have been fine defensively, but he's making zero impact on how the team is doing because his defensive rating is something like 198. Yeah. It's like catastrophic. Like you're not trading Barnes, and the Clippers are like, no thanks, but no thanks.
I actually don't think you can get the money.
Right, so it's like, well, I mean, Wes is at 17.
Well, actually, you know what? You could do Powell, McRoberts, and Nerlens, and that'll get the money.
Yeah, but the Clippers aren't doing that.
Well, I mean, like, would Dallas be willing to give up their 2019 first?
I don't think so.
Probably not, just because there's no actual assurance that he would resign. But he is from the area, right? Or is he from Houston? I can't remember.
I mean, and you got Dennis Smith Jr., Dennis Smith Jr., Harrison Barnes, and DeAndre Jordan as your core.
Oh boy.
Yeah, let's back away from that gently.
Let's decide no on that one. I mean, like Boston is another option, I guess in theory. But they've been fine.
There's two options. There's two options. Well, yeah. So the Boston thing is always going to kind of be out there, but Mitch Lawrence had a note about this, and this has kind of been reverberated a little bit. There's more and more talk that, and you know how Boston. Sure. you know how Boston's relationship with the media goes.
Oh yeah.
So it's not like you're short on information about what they're thinking. Boston, I'm pretty sure that Ainge is just like, Anthony Davis is going to be there. We're going to wait for Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And that's the smart thing to do. He's going to have the assets, and that's going to be the player, and he's not going to have to give up that much.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to get another sweetheart deal for Anthony Davis, and then he's going to have Kyrie Irving and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and Al Horford and Anthony Davis and Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier and probably not Marcus Smart, then like 19 other good guys, and whoever they get with the Lakers pick it like a million dudes that are all good, and that's just how it will go. New Orleans, though, that's like an interesting one. All right, so like let's say the Cousins thing gets poisoned, right?
I mean, like, how do you even?
Blake and Cousins actually fit really well together. That's a combo that actually makes sense.
I agree. The issue, so like it has to be a three-way trade, right? Like I don't think that, well, maybe not. I mean, like I don't think New Orleans is taking DeAndre.
Why not?
I guess why would be my question. Like okay. I don't know how that works on offense.
So all right, think about this. If you're New Orleans, if you're at this point where you're trading him, okay, you're trading him because things have gotten so bad, and you're about to lose him in free agency. You only have 3 months of a rental on him, right? So your value is already mitigated, and your choices are going to be garbage. Like your choices at this point are going to be trash for what teams are going to offer you for 3 months of the poison well that is DeMarcus Cousins. Okay?
Yeah.
You cannot play Anthony Davis at 5.
It's
been shown time and time again. If you play Anthony Davis at 5, he is going to get hurt, and you're just going to be sad. Like, you cannot, under any circumstances, play Anthony Davis at 5. He has to play the 4. Yeah. So, okay, you have Drew Holiday, who's a good pick-and-roll point guard, and you have DeAndre Jordan, who's really good at catching lobs, and you have Anthony Davis. Your whole thing has been, like, your best part of your team is defense. That's the best part of their squad, right? Like, here's the other thing. If you add DeAndre Jordan, you can start sloughing off perimeter defenders because you have a rim protector, which means you can start adding defensive liabilities who are shooters just to get your offense back on track.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and look, DeAndre's
New Orleans is relatively close enough to,
and DeAndre Jordan's timeline, it works perfectly with where the Pels are going to be, because when DeAndre Jordan's contract expires, the New Orleans Pelicans will know if they're going to have to trade Anthony Davis.
I weirdly don't hate this.
It makes a lot of sense just from a mitigated value standpoint. Like if you can get the Clippers to throw in, not a pick, but if you can get the Clippers to throw in
Lou Williams,
whoever, yeah, Lou Williams would be really good. Just like, hey, go get buckets off the bench.
Yeah, shit, he might start.
Makes some sense. Another one that's not a bad actual option. This is the thing; there are actually a lot of good options for DeAndre. You want a really good option? Minnesota's a really good option.
Oh, yeah, I don't like that at all.
Cat is better at 4. You just can't... One, you can't trust him at 5. Like, that's pretty established, and they think he's a 4, and he wants to play 4. And,
yeah, I think he's like 21, and, 21-year-olds are really bad at defense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he'll get better.
I think they should be teaching him to play the 5 defensively. Like, I think that will help him.
Yeah, and I think he'll get better, but, like, if that gets to the point, you can also let him slide. You can let DeAndre Jordan walk in free agency, because if you're Minnesota and you have Jimmy Butler and Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns, you can go get an upgrade in free agency in 2018, 19.
Yeah, I guess you can. That's true.
And, like, you'd be trading off Jang and, like...
I don't know who else they want.
Yeah.
They fucked up on number 16 last year. Tyus is not enough. Like, I don't know who else they would get.
So anyway, like, there are options out there that are, like...
sneaky under the radar.
Yeah, that are, like, okay.
All right, we've gone too far off topic. I want to get into this last thing real quick before I let you go. I think that often, and I think you agree with this, there's too much of an emphasis placed on tearing the whole thing down and trying to go for titles because there's a higher degree of variance whenever you tear things down. You have the whole world, this world of hope, this world of ability to build whatever you want to build with it, with high draft picks and everything like that. That, to me, drastically ignores the realities of many NBA franchises on a number of levels. But before I kind of give you those levels, I want to just kind of give you the floor on why tearing it all down is not always the best idea.
It just ignores a lot of realities. And I was arguing with Kevin O'Connor about this, and I get where Kevin's coming from.
Kevin's smart.
Kevin's smart.
Yeah.
Kevin works for The Ringer. Kevin's got a great writing gig, knows a lot of people in the league. He's very well connected. Smart dude. Believe a lot in Kevin. Love his draft work. The problem is that it ignores a lot of the realities of what comes next. And we touched on this when I was talking about it earlier. There's just very little guarantee that the players that you're going to get in return are going to be better than what you have now, even for the foreseeable future, even if they're aging. And the second problem is, this is how fans think. Okay, we have a good team now. We had a good team. It's gotten bad. It's time to blow this thing up. We got to get ahead of this thing and rebuild. It's time for a rebuilding project. All right, we'll trade all of our good players for prospects and first-round picks, and we'll have young players and first-rounders. And then we'll draft top 5 player after top 5 player after top 5 player, and then we're going to have another super team, and we'll be even better. And they've seen this happen, and it's happened in OKC, and it's happened in a very convoluted way with Philadelphia. What does not get talked about is Sacramento from 2004, or 2007 really. Last year's the Kevin Martin run through 2017. What doesn't get talked about is Minnesota from 2004 until 2017. What doesn't get talked about is Orlando since 2012. And Orlando, to me, is a crystal clear example of why it is that you need to be cautious with how you talk about this stuff, because Orlando, if you fail, if you're a losing team, then people will just point to stuff and say, this was wrong and this was bad and this is bad and they have bad management, they have bad coaching, all this stuff is bad. Here's the reality. Rob Hennigan looked at the situation and said, okay, we trade Dwight Howard, we've got assets, we're going to rebuild from the start. We're going to tank our faces off and we're going to get a star player because that's the only way to win. So they tanked and they tanked and they tanked. And they got the number 2 pick. They just happened to get it in a year where the draft class turned out to be one of the worst we've ever seen.
Yep.
And they took a player that, when you look at the top 10, looks pretty good. Victor Oladipo. And at the time, the argument was Anthony Bennett or Victor Oladipo. That was the conversation. It was those, and there's a third guy. Who was the third guy?
Well, Anthony Bennett wasn't really in the conversation even. It was Nerlens. It was Victor Oladipo. Ben McLemore was in there. Alex Len.
Nerlens had slid because of the injury. I remember that Nerlens had slid because of the injury. Bennett was talked about. Bennett was in the top 5
he was
conversation.
Talked about, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But he wasn't
Yeah.
It wasn't. Nerlens, the conversation was about.
We're idiots. It's Otto Porter is the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And God, maybe it's now really a debate between him. Giannis is obviously the best player from that class. But no one you. You can't kill them for not knowing. No one knew about Giannis. It just wasn't he was too much of an unknown.
Yeah.
It's just
it's like Giannis. It's Rudy Gobert, CJ, and Otto are the 4. I would say.
And there's Adams too.
And Steven Adams. I would say Steven Adams he's probably right on Porter's level. So yeah, I would say that's about right.
But anyway, they took the best player that was available, who a lot of people thought was the number 1 pick. I thought Victor Oladipo was the best player in the class. I loved Victor Oladipo coming out of Indiana. Loved him. They took the best player. Guess what? Victor Oladipo was only okay. And Victor Oladipo is having himself a great season in Indiana. But the best player in Indiana that no one's talking about has been Darren Collison. Darren Collison's been the best player in Indiana. He's been phenomenal for them. Had a domestic violence charge last year, pled guilty to misdemeanor on it. That needs to be mentioned, and where we're at in society, that has to be talked about. But
not a great dude.
But what?
Not a great dude. Pretty okay saying that right now.
Well, that's absolutely true. He's not a great dude. It was shocking to a lot of people because his reputation before then had been really great dude.
It's true.
But this one thing does definitely cloud everything. And yeah, you're right. Not a great dude. So Victor Oladipo isn't even the best player on that team. He's having a great season though. Been awesome for Indiana. But the fact is that if he had shown any of that in Orlando, and you could point to it and say, all right, well, what about their player development? Okay, sure. But we've seen time and time again, guys shine with their talent through all that, where you just are able to look at them and be like, no, that guy's really good.
Right.
Like, that guy's really good, and he's going to be really good. And it doesn't matter how he develops, he's going to be really good. It just didn't work. And so, like, they tanked, and they only got him. And they didn't land number one. They didn't land number one next year. They didn't land number one the year after. Like, they haven't. And then they got into such a hole that whether it was Hennigan or it was Alex Martin, the executive vice president, somebody in the organization said, we got to start winning now. We have to start trying to shift and stop trying to rebuild, and we got to go get veterans.
And that's what they started doing.
And that's when they started doing, like, a bunch of dumb stuff. That's where, like, the Ibaka move comes in, and that's where the Bismack Biyombo deal comes in. Like, when you start throwing money, and you throw money, and this is important to consider in the context of these rebuilding squads, the reason that Orlando was overpaying for all of these players is because when you're a losing franchise in a small market, that's what you have to do to make up the difference. You have to make up the difference by overpaying guys. You don't get to be like, oh, we're going to pay you below the minimum because I know you want to come here because your wife wants to be in LA, or because you have a movie business, or you got friends here. It doesn't work like that. Or you're from New York. It's not like that. So you have to make up for the difference. Like, very few people are in the NBA, very few star players on a free agent market are going to be like, you know what, I really want to go to Memphis.
Yeah.
Like, that's why when Chandler Parsons was like, I want to go to Memphis, even with the injuries and all, that was a risk that they had to take because it was a player that was a considerable upgrade for them that was willing to come there. And you have to take those opportunities. And that's a team that made the playoffs 6 years in a row going in.
I didn't hate that move, to be honest. Like, I get that it was bad, like it's bad now, but I didn't hate that. And he's making threes this year, and he looks better than he did last year. But like, I didn't hate that move when it happened. I thought, you know what, if they get a 16-point-a-game guy who shoots 40% from three, that's fine.
The idea is, well, if you tank right, and if you rebuild right, if you blow it up right, it'll work. What that assumes then, and this is something that does bother me with how we approach these conversations as media and fans on social media. This assumes that every guy that has failed in a rebuild has been a moron, that they just didn't know what they were doing and they were just dumb.
Right.
And if you talk to some of these guys, that is not the impression that you get.
No.
Like, there's just a lot of times when you're like, no, this is like a really smart, thoughtful guy who knows a lot about the league and is very conscientious, but he made one bad decision and that spiraled, or he never had that one break go his way. You know? Like, you land the number one pick in 2012 and 2014, and it's a whole different deal. Like, we're talking about a different situation. And, like, 2014 wasn't even, like, dramatically awesome. Like, if the Magic get Wiggins, are they, like, is Hennigan still there? Maybe, maybe not. But it looks a lot better. You know, if you get Wiggins or Parker, it looks a lot better. But we assume that if you fail, it's because you did something wrong, rather than this is hard. And in particular, it's just really hard to go through that process and to survive it. And guys shouldn't make decisions based off of... They shouldn't make decisions based off of whether this is going to lose you your job or not. Like, you should do the right thing for the franchise regardless. That's your obligation. Right.
It's hard to think that, though, whenever you're on the chopping block, like, full stop, though. Like, it's human.
Well, and a lot of that is you're trying to do what's best by the organization, but sometimes what's best for the organization isn't what your owner's saying. Yeah. Your owner is saying, well, I'm the owner, and I'm telling you, I want to be 500 next season. I want to make the playoffs.
Or in the Clippers case, for instance, Steve Ballmer might not want to blow it up because they're trying to get a new arena, and Blake is a very marketable star. Right.
And so these decisions become very different. There's just a lot that goes on. And the other thing is that, like, there's locker room combinations. And those things are difficult to manage and keep together. You may have a veteran that you're like, well, it'd be better if we kept him. But, like, look, if he's around, like, a bunch of young guys, he may just be miserable and his play suffers. Like, all of these things are really complicated. And it also depends on you being able to dictate the terms of the trade market, which is something I used to really believe in and have come around a lot on. That, like, the trade market is baffling and infuriating. And that goes for everybody that's involved in it.
Well, there aren't rational actors all the time.
No.
Like, it's assumed that everyone in the NBA is a rational actor, but everyone has very differing views and differing evaluations on players. Like, the NBA in general is not the groupthink bubble that NBA Twitter can be sometimes with people. So it makes it even more complicated with irrational actors in what is supposed to be a rational marketplace.
Right. And, especially like these owners get involved. I mean, like Vivek Randive thought that Buddy Hield was the next incarnation of Steph Curry.
Yeah.
And that's insane for a lot of reasons. But it's also just
I love Buddy, but it's not great.
It's insane in very like subtle ways too, right? It's not like very obvious ways,
right?
And that stuff gets missed. So I just think I think rebuilding is way harder, and I think that you get caught in cycles where you can do the right thing and then it just won't work out. The other thing I would say
it's like the Andrew Wiggins scenario, right? Like Andrew Wiggins is like the subtlety of this. So everyone was so excited when Andrew Wiggins gets drafted. Well, what happens when Andrew Wiggins is a 20-point per game scorer instead of a 28-point per game scorer?
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing is, let's say you do it all right, okay? And you rebuild and you get the super team. Because one of O'Connor's tenets is, well, I'm just talking about it from a championship perspective. Okay. So that's a very Boston approach. And again, right? Like 18, you see those banners every night. You think that's how it should be.
Yeah. And also, building for championships is more fun. People who grow up. I mean, I think I'm just about Kevin's age, to be honest. But like people who grow up in this society where we have NBA 2K, and one of the most fun things to do on 2K is to sell off your whole fucking roster and then try and build from scratch and build with draft picks and build with young prospects. Like that's a blast. Like I think that plays a part in it too.
Right. So here's the thing, you trade off everything and you get all these draft picks and you're loaded and you're the talk and everybody's like, oh, look at all this talent. And like they're just gonna be set for years. They're gonna be good for years. The Portland Trailblazers, the conversation was this team is set for the next 10 years with Brandon Roy, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Greg Oden. Nope. Guess what? It wasn't. In 2012, as LeBron celebrated his first title and Kevin Durant hugged his mom, the talk was, tough one for the Thunder, but you can bet on one thing, folks, they'll be back. And we all believed that. We thought it was going to be Heat Thunder for 4 years. Like, who's going to beat those teams? The Oklahoma City Thunder never returned to the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia 76ers right now are the talk of the league. Look at all this talent. Like, they're so good now. Can you imagine what they're going to be like in 10 years? Can you imagine? Well, yeah, but we know the injury history. We know what's happened. And what if in time Ben Simmons and Embiid grow apart, or Markelle Fultz doesn't come through and they're struggling to find that third guy, or whatever? Like, life gets in the way of these things, and it's just not set. The Warriors were a cacophony of unexpected and spectacular events that shaped the league. DeAndre Jordan breaking the tweener label on his own. Klay Thompson arriving as the second best shooter of all time, only because he's partnered with the best shooter of all time, who was on a massive discount contract because of a severe ankle injury that had hindered him year after year after year. And then all of that combines with a roster that was manageable and flexible enough, with an organization that was smart enough to manage it and create it, and to make the move to fire Mark Jackson and bring in Steve Kerr, and for Steve Kerr to choose them over the Knicks job, and for Steve Kerr to bring in this specific brand of basketball that preached joy and small ball after he was the GM in Phoenix who traded Shawn Marion for Shaquille O'Neal. Everything about the Warriors is unbelievable. Everything about the Spurs is unbelievable from the context of they are such a testament to you. If you instill the right culture, you can sustain almost everything, but even they have gotten massive breaks. If Indiana doesn't do the deal, if Indiana doesn't trade their pick, and they just keep their guy. They keep the pick and they take somebody else besides Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi goes somewhere else. If LaMarcus Aldridge decides to go to Phoenix, if Tim Duncan goes to Orlando, if Tony Parker decides, I've had a really good run here, but I want to go and see what New York is like. That's what I want to do. Because if people forget this, Amari Stoudemire, the night before he signed with the New York Knicks, walked out of a Broadway play and said, it's going to be me, Carmelo Anthony, and Tony Parker. It's already decided. That conversation was already happening.
Yeah.
And then the Melo stuff dragged out, and then Parker, his life changed, and he decided to stay in San Antonio. And all of these things change. This is way off track, but 2014, the air conditioning doesn't go out in Game 1. The Heat were, I think, within 2 points and were basically overwhelming San Antonio when LeBron goes down with cramps. They wound up winning Game 2. If the Heat take Games 1 and 2 in San Antonio, in that series, how does the rest of the 2014 finals go? And if they win the title, what does LeBron decide to do? My point is that the idea that rebuilds are these clearly set stone things that are just, it's just going to be this way. And you could definitely do this. And this will be way better. You don't know that. It could be way worse. And what winds up happening is not only do you get fired, but your fans have to sit through a decade of abject misery where you're never in conversations for a marquee free agent. You're never getting excited about what's going on. You're just waiting for the next time that the draft pick that you guys get 5 through 10 doesn't work out while the guy above and behind you turn into all-stars. And this happens year after year after year. So when you have a good thing, you should hold on to it for as long as you can until you're absolutely sure it's dead, and only then do you move on. Memphis may be there. That may be where Memphis is at. I'm not ruling it out. But you have to be absolutely sure before you go down that road.
Yeah, and the team that I think sneakily kind of came up this summer when that happened was Toronto, right? If Kyle Lowry leaves, what does Toronto do?
Right.
I don't know. They probably should consider at that stage moving DeMar DeRozan. And
I just love that Masai Ujiri never gets to rebuild. I love the guy so much. He's such a good GM, and he's one of the best people in this league.
Yeah.
But Masai's wanted to rebuild with every team he's been with for so long, and they keep outperforming expectations to where he never gets to actually rebuild.
Yeah.
He just has to keep competing.
Oh, man.
It's really amazing.
It is. Matt, I think I've kept you long enough. I mean, do we have anything else that we can talk about? We've already gone for an hour and 10 minutes. Hour and 20 minutes.
Are you still hanging on to Alonzo Island, or are you ready to...
I think he's fine.
Fine. I'm with you. I think he's fine. I think he's a really good... I legitimately love his rebounding. I legitimately love the way he rebounds. I'm just God, he's got such a great nose for the ball.
See, the thing is, with me, you're talking to someone who had him at 4 on his board. Right. I wasn't Lonzo Ball is going to save basketball.
Where'd you have Tatum?
I had Tatum at 2. I was higher on Tatum than any person in the NBA draft world, I think.
I love Tatum. I loved him so much. There was a time that I was thinking about 1, and then I went back and watched more of Markel's ability to run pick and roll, and I was ooh, that's too good. But man, I love Tatum, and I'm not one of those people that's going to be I knew. I'm just I did know he was going to be great. The polish on his game is incredible.
Yeah.
Drew Hanlon did work with that kid.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I think that's part of the reason that I was confident. I talked to Drew. It was Drew kind of pushed me in the right direction on Jason Tatum. I was okay, I can see now. And it wasn't just Drew. It was people around him that would be oh, this kid's the real deal from a personality perspective. He is focused and hyper-driven. It's guys like that where I'm okay, I can get behind that guy. I feel confident in that guy. Josh Jackson, I think he's hyper-driven, but I had him below Jason Tatum because he's a little bit crazy.
What's DeAndre Ayton's ceiling?
Ceiling is legitimately a top 5 player in the NBA.
That's exciting. Oh, that's exciting.
He's 7'1". You've seen how big he is. He has a 42-inch vertical leap already. Arizona did vertical leap testing earlier this year. You see the test, they posted a video of it. His hand is at the top of the backboard. It's incredible. There are questions with DeAndre. He has never really been pushed. Like he's just always been 7 foot tall, 240 pounds, 7'6" wingspan. Like he was just so much better that half the time in high school, he just didn't have to play hard. Like he would still get 18 points and 17 rebounds, even if he just kind of fucked around for 10 minutes. We'll see how that works. Like Arizona loses 3 games in the Bahamas. His stats look amazing. I think he averaged like 20 points and 12 rebounds in those 3 games, but his defense was really bad. Like there were times where he just wouldn't know where to rotate. He still doesn't really communicate all that well defensively. He's also 19 years old. I think he's going to figure it out. I think he's probably the highest ceiling player in the draft, though. Like in terms of like, okay, this guy can be a top 5 player in the NBA. I think he's the guy. I mean, like I'm not ready to call him the number 1 guy yet, but like I think that he has the highest ceiling of anyone.
Okay, I'm very excited. Okay,
yeah, you should be very excited for him.
Yeah.
Like, what have you watched Bagley at all yet?
I have. I haven't watched his most recent stuff. I checked him out early. I mean, I guess my only thing is, the discussion has been like you can see that he's comfortable. Like there's a comfort on the perimeter, even if the shot's not there. And I don't know. I'm just like, if you're not DeAndre Ayton size and you're a big, you better be able to stretch. Like you've got to be able to stretch in this league.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that because unless you're just a monster physically, I just don't know how you can adapt. So that's my only concern with Bagley. Like the skill's definitely there. He's got his athleticism is just unreal. Like, just crazy.
Never seen something like it.
But the NBA's got a lot of athletic dudes. Like, we're not exactly short on athletic dudes.
I will say this. Like, I think he is, for his size, an elite athlete, even by NBA standards.
Yeah. And that'll help him, but, I mean, I don't know, like, I wasn't as much of an informed individual about basketball then, but, like, I just remember Tyrese Thomas. That's like the one I always going to go back to. And like, he will be better than Tyrese Thomas. This is not the comparison I'm making. My only point is like, Tyrese is so freaking athletic. Like, he was crazy athletic. But like, you do have, and especially now, like, you have to have the mindset, the skills, and the ability to find like, even, here's the crazy thing
so like, here's going to be my case to you with Tyrese Thomas, right? So like, Tyrese Thomas was 6'9". He was like 215 pounds.
Right.
Coming out, right? Super skinny, not like crazy tall. He was a pure 4, I think.
Yeah.
He averaged 12 points a game and 9 rebounds. I don't know if there's going to be a game this year where Marvin Bagley scores like 12 points or less.
Right.
And he's 2 inches taller than Tyrese Thomas. He's 25 pounds heavier already. And I think he honestly might be a better athlete.
Wow.
It's crazy. He's crazy. And he plays hard. Like, the other thing is, too, like, he just plays harder. You know? Like, you see him, he is getting every single rebound. His second and third jump is incredible. Like, his work ethic is just off the charts, I think.
Yeah. What's my other one for you? Why do Missouri fans, like, why did this happen to us? Why?
For people who don't know, Matt went to Missouri.
Like, like the one time, like I never expected a number 1 pick to ever go to Missouri. I never expected that. Like, I've been fine if it never happened. This is somehow worse, Sam. Like, it's somehow worse than never having had one.
It's pretty bad. And like, you know, you had Jonte go there, and the father go there, and like 2 sisters are there.
Dad, like the whole family's there.
It's bad, man. It's bad.
Why would the basketball gods do this? And then the answer is, because you're a racist school. And that gets complicated, but still.
Oh, my God. It's like, I feel bad for Missouri fans. I do. Michael Porter's really good. He's really fun.
So bad.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Is Doncic still number 1 on your board?
He is. It's getting harder every day, I would say. I flip every day between him, Bagley, and Ayton. It's a tier. Like, it's. I don't know. Like, I don't set the number 1 anymore in November. It's just not worth. Like, I have to do it for like a mock draft. Like, I have to like say this guy's number 1. It's a tier at the top right now.
If anybody on Twitter asks you should just be like, I don't set number 1s until after the draft.
Oh, they'll shoot me.
That's my number one.
Well, shoot me. Like, just over Twitter. Just end me.
And just take like the Dan Devine approach and just be like, they're all people, man. Like, we're just all people.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a tier at number one. I think there's three guys. I don't, like, some people are like, oh yeah, there's 5 or 6 guys. I think it's 3 guys. Like, I think it's Doncic, I think it's Bagley, and I think it's Ayton. Like, I think one of those 3 are the clear number one by the end of the draft. Maybe not even clear, but like, I think that one of those 3 are going to be the number 1 pick. Mohamed Bamba. We'll see. And Michael Porter has these injuries, and I think that's probably going to knock him out at number 1 at least. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens whenever he gets into the workout process.
This has been really fun. I very much enjoyed this podcast with you. You have a great podcast, Sam.
I very much enjoyed this podcast with you too, Matt. Please rate, review, and subscribe over on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Android, whatever you guys use to listen to podcasts. Matt, I think everyone knows where to find you, but please tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me at HP Basketball. You can find me at Matt Moore CBS. You can find my work at cbssports.com, all over the page.
Please go subscribe to The Athletic and keep me employed. That would be fantastic. We'll be back on either Friday or Saturday. I don't know. Whenever I feel like finding another guest and figuring out what I want to talk to. But until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.